Welcome back to this next video that's going to cover the navigation within UIPlanner, which is mostly straightforward and you'll get used to it over time. And as I said before in the previous video, when you first log into UIPlanner, your screen might look like this. It may not, but it could look like this, and that's okay if it's different. But we can show you a couple things, how to find the things that you need here in UIPlanner. Now, the first thing that we want to do with UIPlanner is we want to look at a particular scenario. Now, you'll notice at the very top of UIPlanner, which this should always be here, this little section at the top, where it has scenario type, scenario group, and scenario. Now, for scenario type, we only have one version of the model that we're running. And I believe that's referred to as the strategic model is what we're running for the financial model. It's just the terminology that UII uses. However, we call it the financial model. The detailed model, I believe, has to do with things that are designed for the responsibility model. But because their version of their model is designed separately on almost a completely separate instance, this is almost unnecessary now. We don't even need this. You don't even need to select this. We have to go and we have to log in a completely different way to get to the responsibility model. But so in that case, because we only have really one functioning version that we're using of the UI Planner software, we'll just always leave it as show all. Now the scenario group, these ones are defined by the admin or by what the users want it to be. But we have a couple buckets that we can define for each scenario that we create. Now these have to be assigned for each new scenario that's created. If a scenario is not assigned to any one of these 5 current groups that we have here, then it won't show up when you select any one of these. So like for example, if we get a new fall plan scenario, if the admin did not assign it to this group, it will not show up within this group. So therefore, you'll probably have to select all scenarios in order to see it. But this kind of helps narrow the selection down. As you see it narrows the selection as you go from left to right. So if we select all scenarios, you'll notice that over here, on the scenario drop down, that we pretty much have all the scenarios within the financial model that are available to us. We can go into a little more detail later about all these different scenarios and the naming convention, but for right now, we are just going to stay in the current scenario that we've been working on lately, which is the 2018 Fall Plan version 1. Now, when you want to find things in UIPlanner, the first and foremost report that you will run in UIPlanner is this one called the Run Sequence Set. As you'll notice, how I got there was under the Administration tab, and come here and you can select Run Sequence Sets. Now, if you don't like using those drop-down menus right here at the very top, you can also hit Control 12. Control 12 will bring up this little dialog box right here, and then you can type in the name that you're looking for. And so in this case, let's say that we want to use that one we just selected just a few minutes ago, the Run Sequence Sets. We can just type in Run, because we know the first word of that name of the thing that we're trying to bring up, and then it'll find this for us. You can also bring up other items, and this, for example, like case. This is one that the admin uses quite often. You can also bring up manage scenarios. Now these reports you probably won't even need to use because you'll need to contact your admin in order to unlock scenarios or cases. Another one that you'll definitely want to see is the attributes. sometimes. For some people that are in Treasury, currently the model is designed to define the attributes for every individual bond. Or if you're in the regulatory department, you may have to define all of the various attributes for each regulatory asset. And as time goes on, maybe some of those may not be true in the future, but that's currently how that it is designed, and we can change those. Now, we can get into the differences between attributes and overlay data later, but for this purpose of this, we are just going to show you how to find the particular information that you're looking for. So, when you come here and you run a scenario, you can see here that when I have this scenario selected, it brings up all the reports that are assigned to this scenario to run. Now, each scenario that you pull up here, it might have different reports. It might have less or more, and some of these reports might be different from each scenario. And that's mainly because each scenario has different attributes, different actuals, different formulas, different multi-dims, and different overlay cases. And we'll get into that more later about what the differences between these are. But essentially, each scenario can be different. Now, some can have a lot of similarities, but suffice it to say that we have these reports that are assigned to this particular report. Now, in UIPlanner, as you can see, when we're in this run sequence, this is the one main section that you'll be in a lot of the time. You'll spend a lot of time in this, because this is where all the action really happens. This is where all the information gets consolidated and reports are created, and you're able to see the results of the information that you're trying to input, or information that results that you're trying to get out of the model after you've input your numbers. So you can see that the model has these various reports, and each report you can see what you want by simply, you can right click it, you can say browse report, edit time data, edit attributes, just like we just have that tab that we brought up earlier. Edit the calculation. This one, you don't really use this very often, and you probably won't use this one. So you probably can just ignore these ones for right now. And then view calculation and trace dependencies and precedents. Now, this one is really powerful right here, this trace dependence and precedents, because this can tell you a lot about what's connected to that report, what reports are dependent on it, and what reports are precedent to it. So that means, like, just close that. Sorry, I didn't mean to click it. But you can check it out later. Essentially, it says, this report, typically, this platform assumptions, this one will only have dependencies. So there's only reports out here that depend on this report and the numbers that are coming through it. It doesn't have any precedents, meaning that it doesn't have any information that it depends on in order for it to function typically. So we have here some of the other things like edit time data. This one you will be using quite often if you have to manually change information. You select your case, you select the entity, you select the line within that report, and you select the time frame. We'll go into that one later. And then, if you want to change attributes, so instead of change edit time data, you have to come here, select the regulatory asset, or the particular one you have, and then you have, some are data points, like this. Some are drop-down menus, and some are values that you type in there. Typically, you will only change these down here, which are referred to as the attributes, but there's also a thing called associations. Now, what these are essentially just helping the model understand what its relationship is between other entities and other entity groups. And we'll go more into that later when we cover all the attributes in another lesson. Now there's some other features in this model that helps you understand kind of like what you're looking at. Another useful feature is called the one parameter editor. What the one parameter editor does is it's kind of like the edit attributes. And you can see here you can select one entity at a time. You can edit, and that's fine if you're just only editing one entity or if you're just editing a few. But if you have to edit a lot of entities at the same time, a one parameter editor might be more useful. So let's go back here and we'll see we have rig assets. We'll say we want to see the particular, we'll just say show all attributes, and then we'll say we'll use the base attribute case. This way this makes it so that once you select this, makes it so that you can actually change those values. So you can see here's the rig assets at the left. Here's the date. Here's all the associations, I believe. Nope, that's not the association. This is all attributes. So basically what that is that it's this window right here. Instead of being like this nice little neat window, it disperses it to the right in a table. I'll show you again. So now you can just simply click here and change what you need. Just go to the right, you can see there's a whole bunch of other fields that you can select. You can make the menu wider if you can't see what you're looking at. There you go. One parameter editor. It's another way to another navigable item that is really important if you're trying to change a lot of attributes at the same time. So here, up here on the top, you'll notice that there is a file save and a view pending attribute save. Now the save will just save it right away without telling you what it's actually saving. I prefer that you get in the habit of clicking this, which is called View Pending Attribute Save. The reason why that's important, because you can see right here, for example, you see, oh, I made a change on accident, maybe. So I can click here, say undo all, and then hit save. The reason why that's important is because here you can see I haven't made any changes, or after that last one, well, I undid it. You can see here I haven't made any changes, and so I can see, oh, okay, there's nothing that I need to save, so I can just hit close if I want. However, sometimes people want to hit save, mainly because, let's say another person is in the model. Let's say, like, for example, in my case, sometimes the tax department is making changes, and I need to capture their changes, but I'm in the model as well. And in order for me to capture their changes, if they've done it over the last hour, and I haven't refreshed my model, I have to come here and hit save. Now, even though this is blank, they have maybe already made changes, but I won't see their changes here. But I still have to hit save. And then once it hits save, it actually goes back out to the server and grabs that new information and brings it in. In this case, that information that the tax department is working on. And then I can see it and run the model and see the results of those values. Now the other thing here is there's a thing called a copy to local database. Now you probably will never use this, but if anyone wanted to try to output the whole model into like a database format, such as Microsoft Access database, you could do that. I wouldn't think that it's really important, but it could become really crazy if everyone started doing this, and it takes a while to actually do. It's not an easy thing. Now there's another one here. There's view published datasets. View published datasets basically just helps people understand what is actually going to and fro this model. In this case, The only one that really matters in this case is typically when it's referring to information that we're getting from responsibility, in this case capital. We won't use the switchboard. We don't have a switchboard for UIPlanner, or at least for the financial model, I mean, but that is more relevant for the responsibility model. This changes the order of information that you see, like in menus. Instead of showing it in model order, which is a number, it'll show it in alpha order. You can play with some of these if you like, but I would advise trying to get used to UIPlanner before you make any of these changes, because it might confuse you later, like all the different style differences, which are not many, but there are quite a few different style differences. Then there's budget import. You will not be using this one. This one is mainly for when we import actuals. I know it's called budget import, but we actually use it for importing information from the staging table that is updated every night with information from the UIP. Browse reports. Now you only use this once after the model is run, which we will show in the next video since this takes some time. And then you have managed scenarios, managed cases. Again, these are things that mainly the admin will use, but it's useful to kind of go there and just see what cases are in the scenario that you're running. It might be helpful to you, just for review of what you're actually doing. But other than that, you most likely won't use these. And part of the reason why you won't need to use those is because when you go to edit time data, you'll notice here that when you're in a particular scenario, you can see these are all the cases that are actually used, all the data cases anyways, that are used in this scenario. So if you're opening the edit time data, you're always going to see what cases are being used at any given moment in time. And this may change in the future, but we have set up the security settings in UIPlanner so that everyone can see, everything is visible. We could in the future make these invisible, like certain cases could be invisible to tax users, like for example all cases could be invisible except for the tax cases in the actual case or their temp case. But we haven't chosen to do that yet, but that could be a possibility in the future. In which case then you maybe might need to see the managed scenarios. I won't go through all these other ones, but there's some other tools in here like the Rapid Data Finder, which helps you find any changes that have been made recently to the model. And then here's another one. So you have a managed ledger, which can actually help you show you what the ledger is like in UIPlanner, which usually is very similar, if not the same, as the HFM ledger. And if you're in accounting or you're familiar with the accounting structure that we use that we inherited from PHE, then this should look familiar to you. Then we have in a section that map accounts for indirect cash flow. You probably won't need to worry about that. This is something else you probably won't have to worry about unless you're actually making significant changes in the model or you're actually modeling in the model. Input actuals. Now there's a field where instead of edit time data, there's actually this one called input actuals, which is basically inputting to the base actuals case instead of a black or yellow over the case. Edit allocations. This one, if you're in the regulatory department, it will help you to figure out what are the allocations that are being used between various reports. We can get into that a little bit more deeper later, but it basically tells the model how to allocate information from one point to another using whatever allocators that you have, like production allocators that are defined in the model. You know, certain percentages that we either manually or calculate in the model. I'm skipping over a couple of these because we don't use them very often, like the browse transactions, push from report to report, browse allocated data. You could use these and explore them, but we hardly use them. Now, we have all these other ones here in this section. A lot of them, again, you probably won't be using. The main one is the run sequence sets, the trace dependencies, group reports. The good thing about group reports here is that it allows you to see kind of like some information about that particular report. Like, for example, if we scroll down here and we go to a report called fuel and purchase power, you can see here that it has an actuals date set. What that means is that this report has a specific actuals date that it's using. Otherwise, if this is not defined, like for example, like this one's blank. Because it's blank, what it's going to use is the global setting for the scenario, which is always what is set for that particular scenario. But you can override the global setting by setting the actuals date for that particular report. So if there's a number here, that means it's overriding the global setting. You have the time frame in which it runs, whether it decides to consolidate its entities. This only works if it has a consolidating entity. In this case, like planning entity group, it's just like rolls up to like MV Energy Inc. Consolidated or MV Energy LLC Consolidated. That's part of the reason why this is checked. Iterations, what actual entity it's rolling over. And in some cases, if this report has more than one entity, like this report, it has two entity groups that it rolls over. We don't use these other sections, but I won't go into those any further. But this is how you can tell some information real quick. Like for those folks that are worried about, what is actualized for depreciation report or for my fuel purchase power and cost of gas, or deferred energy reports, you can come here and you can see, look at your report and you can see, okay, this is the actual state that's being used for my report. Now another one that you will want to use in the future. Now if you have the edit time data, you do not want to import thousands and thousands of lines of data using the edit time data. You can, it's doable, but sometimes that's not the most efficient way of doing it. And I've already worked with some people in the rates department, and to come up with ways to import information very effectively. And this model import is very effective in bringing in information. This is an error that I'm trying to look through right now, so you can ignore that. And this model import, it can import information in all different types of ways, and we'll go into this to a little bit more detail later. But there's some already pre-settings here, and the model import allows us to basically import information from like a text tab delimited file, or from like a CSV, which is very much similar to a text tab delimited file. And we can go into a little more detail about how we create those files that we can then load into UIPlanner, which it can load information in a bunch of different ways. Which I can show you multiple different ways that we can load information into UIPlanner. Now we have this one that's called the Core Object Editor. This one is used quite often by the admin to make changes, especially renaming particular entities in the model or just different objects in the model. But one thing that it serves as is allowing us to set the interface codes, because when we were talking about the model import, one of the things that model import relies on interface codes. You need to know what you mean by a particular item in the model. And the only way for the model to know is you have to tell it what it is. In this case, like for example, when I go through the process of loading actuals into the model using what our current process is right now, is information directly from the HFM, which you can see here. This looks very familiar. So these are the accounts that are currently used in UIPlanner. And then we have this interface code. And these might look like a little bit of gibberish to you, but this is basically instead of a FERC account number that we're typically used to when we're managing information in our business, we have these alpha mapping codes that are used to assign to, like, for example, here, regulated electric retail residential revenue. This is basically its account and alpha characters instead of numbers. And this is what basically HFM uses. This is their unique account. Each one of these is unique. There's not one that is the same. Now there are ones here that have more than one defined, but that's mainly because at one point in time there was a decision not to create a separate account for, like, let's say, intercompany, which is what the EIC stands for. So someone decided not to create a separate account and just map both of them to the same line. So the interface codes are very, very important if you want to use the other features of the model, which is model import or the UI gets and the export for pull reports, which we can get to later. It's really important that you know these interface codes and how they work and how to make changes to them. Now this core object editor has other things in here like visibility, names, and some other things that we use, like delete. I believe that for some users, a lot of these will be grayed out, so they won't look like a normal color each one. Some of them might be a different color or a different shade, and that means that you just simply don't have access to make changes on those particular tabs. Now another one is that I will suggest is don't use this one. Delete lines for multiple cases. That is something that maybe the admin should do, and we should really sometimes this process can take a really long time, and it's usually we don't use it. Now we have these other ones here which you might use. Depends on if you are looking at OMAG or capital, and if you're not looking at the detail for OMAG and capital, this will be irrelevant to you. But this is the multidimensional calculations. Essentially, this is how we pull information from the responsibility model, organize it, and then save it to a local data copy that is basically stored right next to information that we have for the financial model. And we'll see that here. It's a local copy. We can run it, but I'm not going to. But this is basically where you go if you want to run the multidimensional calculations for the OMAG and capital. Now there's possible future improvements, where we could probably do things with regulatory assets if there was a way to pull the information for the regulatory assets into some kind of staging table and then pull that information. There's a possibility there. There's a huge improvement there. So this could be used more in the future if people wanted to bring in information in a particular format. Something that maybe they don't want to use model import. Maybe they don't want to use edit time data. Multidimensional calculation is another way of bringing information into the model. So essentially there's 3 ways to bring data in. Actually, there's 4, because I forgot about the budget import. Now there's these other preferences down here that you can select. Like I said before, I wouldn't change these until you get comfortable with the model and you're understanding how things work. I would avoid changing these, especially for if you need help from the admin. Changing them might make it more difficult for him or her to kind of help navigate through the system and try to help you find things that you need. Because if you make certain changes, he might not be able to replicate your screen and kind of walk you through it. In that case, if you change the way your model looks and feels for your preferences, you might have to share your screen with him or her in order to get through it. If you make significant changes here, not a huge deal. It's not going to not the end of the world if you like change these, but there's a lot in here. But it could cause some heartache if you do change it and you don't know what you did and you don't know how to turn it back, and it might make it also difficult for the admin. So, like I said, get used to them all first before you start looking at these and changing them. But one in particular, for example, that you might want to select is this one, display default code in entity names. This is actually what this does, is basically when you have edit attributes, and say that we're looking at regulatory assets. You see this little code that's right next to it? That's the object ID. Actually, more specifically, it's supposed to be called is the default code. I'm sorry. It's specifically called the default code. Default code is basically the number we can't change. It's unique to that particular thing. There's only this item in the whole model is 969305. There's nothing else in the model that will have that number. It is unique to it. And then these are here for those that are managing the multi-dimensional calculations, like for OMAG Capital. You'll have these dataset security manager. You have to log in here every time someone creates a scenario on the opposite side. On the response block, we have to come in here and make it available for us here on the UIPlanner side. This is probably most likely going to be managed by the admin. I won't go into the other details of these other ones. And then here is this last one. You have this about UIPlanner. You can click here. I have it set up, I believe. Oh, that's not the button. The help button is what I'm sorry. And it should open up a navigation menu, which you can come in here and you can look up particular information. You can learn more about how to use UIPlanner. I don't use this too often, but sometimes I get stumped on how to do a particular item, and sometimes there's some useful information here. It might be helpful as a search bar up here that you could use, and you can find what you need if your admin or other savvy users are not available to help you. And so that ends our little short brief on all the navigation in UIPlanner. We'll start our next video on showing you the model run and showing you how to browse attributes and to make a couple changes in the model. So, and next time, goodbye.